And we're live. Good morning, everyone. Just going to start with a quick video.
For many of us, 2020 was the hardest year of our lives. Australia is still reeling from the economic and social impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the pandemic has accelerated the push towards a digital economy and empowering Australians through technology. More of us are working from home more than ever before, choosing when we come into the workplace. We're using video calls and other communications tools to save time and get more done. One sector critical to the nation's ambition to be a digital economy is the Fintech sector, and its growth through the pandemic has been critical to the economic recovery. It's employing thousands of Australians already and growing rapidly. It's also transforming the way we manage, save, and spend money. Australia's largest emerging companies are fintechs, and they are drawing overseas investment into the country. Many, like Afterpay, Zip, and Upbank, are household names. But crucially, they are helping everyday Australians get smarter with their money. They are teaching them how to save, plan, and capitalize on every dollar they earn. Fintech is slowly but surely changing the way we think about money in Australia. Not only is it directly contributing to our economy, but it's making it stronger. Here at Intersect, we're discussing this future and asking the big questions. We'll be hearing insights from new voices in the sector and giving a platform to some of the behind-the-scenes talent that have put Australia's fintech industry on the map. So sit back and enjoy Australia's most thought-provoking conference, Intersect.
There you go. Welcome, everyone, to the Intersect digital program run and hosted by Fintech Australia. My name is Rehan Makti Almeida, and I head partnerships and marketing at Fintech Australia. The digital program is an opportunity to extend our reach and showcase the latest fintech trends, policy developments, or companies at the forefront of new technologies or products for those that cannot attend the physical event or are attending the virtual conference as a virtual attendee. We would like to take this opportunity to thank our major sponsors, the Victorian Government, Austrade, Xero, BPay, and Data Action. I would also like to thank our digital sponsors, Manuva, Video, Q2, and the Argyle Network, of course. I'd like to introduce you to Cameron Douglas and Matthew Smith, both directors at the Argyle Network, who will be moderating the session today and just leading the conversation, just facilitating this conversation. Thank you again for participating in our digital event series. Over to you, Matt and Cam.
Thanks, Rehan. Thanks, Rehan. So Matt here from the Argyle Network. We're a financial services, fintech, financial markets, technology recruitment business focused on the Australia markets. We're hosting a session here called The Challenges Faced by Australian Fintech Businesses in Hiring and Retaining Talent. I'd like to say a big welcome and thanks to our panelists. We have Rachel Zaire from Slip, Nicholas Tan from Manuva, and Nick Glynn from QuickerPay. It'd be great if you guys can give yourself a bit of an introduction to yourself and your businesses. I think we'll go with Nick Glynn. Sorry, Nick.
Hey, you got to nominate. You can't just throw out.
Sorry.
Yeah, so my name is Nick Glynn. I'm part of QuickerPay. We were founded in 2019 off the back of the Antler program with a mission to solve cash flow for Australian businesses. So we use a pretty innovative tech stack, which we'll cover a bit later, but our goal is to basically revolutionize the way that businesses pay and get paid by offering flexible financing, buy now, pay later, analytics, card processing, and all the tools that small businesses need, with a view that QuickerPay can be a small business financial hub. There you go.
Well, perfect, Nick. You've done that before. Great. Nicholas?
Morning, everyone. My name is Nicholas Tan. I'm the CTO for Manuva as part of the Money Tech group. So Manuva focuses on B2B payments. We're there to make payments be seamless in the background for any business. We've got a very innovative NPP product for auto matching, to support businesses with high invoice and high flow processing.
Great stuff. Thanks. Last but certainly not least, Rachel.
Hello, I'm Rachel Zaire. I'm the head of talent at Slip. Slip is a fintech creating digital receipts that integrate with your banking app. We sit at the intersection between retail and fintech. I'm the head of talent, so my role is really kind of everything people, and that's the role that I played here and elsewhere. I've been in the fintech space for a little while now. Zip, Zinja, some big companies, some small companies in my background.
Good stuff. Thanks for that stuff. So the reason why we wanted to start this webinar and certainly invite the panelists was that we're seeing a huge number of organizations within the space that are hiring at the moment, and there are certainly in this part of the world far too few candidates. What we're finding is that a lot of those candidates are interviewing at lots of different businesses, and it's really difficult to maintain the engagement level. So that's what we're going to try and focus on today. The reason why, and again, thanks for the panelists, is that we wanted to represent most fintech businesses here in Australia with our panelists. So we have, fast-growing startup with Nick and QuickerPay, and then a couple of more established kind of scale-up companies. Obviously, Zip having a dedicated talent acquisition resource as well. So we like to think that from our audience, most members of our audience are going to be represented there. So I think just to talk about the market in a little bit more detail and give an overview of kind of what we're seeing, Cam can interject with that.
Yeah, no, I'll probably just start by going over what Matt's just said. I mean, from our point of view as an external facing agency, I suppose, is that goes without saying that this market at the moment is crazy busy. We're seeing fintech startups, fintech scale-ups, large financial organizations within the FS world tend to be looking for the same sorts of talent. To sort of look that into one, it tends to be more engineering based. And we just felt that certainly the subject of this webinar was very relevant, I suppose, in this current marketplace. It has never been more important, I suppose, for fintech businesses to really, I suppose, go out there and differentiate themselves to attract candidates and to also have a look, I suppose, at their internal processes in terms of securing candidates and probably more importantly, retaining candidates as well. So our overview, I suppose, is that we're seeing from a candidate point of view, they seem to be choosing organizations that can offer the use of innovative technologies, DevOps, cloud, AI, etc. Culture is obviously very important to them. Working on the product is obviously very important, and flexible working as well. I'm sure we'll cover most of those points, I'm sure, as we go through. But that's a sort of brief overview from us. Some of it quite obvious, I'm sure. Nicholas Tan, are you seeing the same thing from a sort of an internal point of view in terms of market perception and speed to market?
Yeah, I think in 2021, everyone's kind of come out of COVID. We're a lot more confident that business has picked up. The government's actions have kind of resulted in that V-shaped recovery to some degree. So there's been a lot of focus in terms of getting back to business and obviously doubling down on FY22 plans. We certainly have, certain growth aspects around our team sizing and have found it not so much challenging, but just it's a busy market. And so you have to be quite quick, in terms of how you're dealing with people and that you're obviously in a competing market with others as well.
Do we lose Matt?
I think we might have lost them there, but I'll keep going and then we can talk with the others. So certainly, as I said, we're on a bit of a recruiting spree ourselves, and part of our process is we just need to be quick about it. It's challenging in that we want to include the engineering team as part of that process, and so obviously part of their day job is keeping systems running, deploying and building new features for the company and making time to that. But it is an important investment of time, so we do make ourselves available as part of that process and be flexible to the candidates. Nick, Rachel, so Nick, go with you first.
I'll step in, seeing as we've lost our critical spine of the meeting. But yeah, given that we're very early stage, I mean, the one thing that we can do is I try to make sure that I'm the first point of contact for a lot of these guys. I'm doing the outreach to recruit them myself in a lot of places, with a view to, I know what I kind of want to achieve. I know what we need to achieve as a business in a lot more intimate way than perhaps like later stage businesses. The one thing that we obviously do is make sure that as that first touch point, we talk the guys through, tell them, explain the journey that we're going to do, make sure that the guys know what each stage is going to look like, what each person's going to be doing, and just make sure that they feel involved the entire time. Like if someone's not a good fit, then the sooner you can let them know. It's one of those, I don't have the luxury of time at the moment. I'm doing 1,000,001 things. And to keep a candidate just hanging for 2-3 weeks, at the end of the day, we're not Google. We can't do that. We can't put up 8 barriers for these guys to work through. It's all about keeping it short, being respectful of their time, because as you mentioned, Nick, the one thing people have at the moment is this total dynamic change where people can work remotely, they can be outside of the office, they expect that ability to actually work at their own pace because they want to be passionate about it rather than just put a bum in a seat, you know? Rachel?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, there's a lot in that. I think if we're purely kind of talking about the market that we're in right now, it's really competitive. Absolutely. And I think, we all just need to acknowledge that it is hard and no one's doing it wrong. Like we are all struggling and the pool is a lot smaller than what we've experienced in recent years. And largely that's due to the limits that we've got on immigration at the moment. So we need to be like a little bit kind to ourselves in some ways that, we are all struggling, but it is an always on activity. I think that's one thing that a lot of us and a lot of leaders really learned last year is that, hiring recruitment isn't something that it's not a point in time. It's not something that you can kind of spin up at any point in the year. It's something that you constantly need to nurture. And it's a team sport. The full team really needs to kind of be engaged and be involved in that. So it can't just fall to you, Nick, or you, Nicholas, or me. We can facilitate it and we can drive it, but you really kind of need to engage the full team behind you as well.
Apologies for that. Slight technical fault, our end. You've been chatting amongst yourselves, no doubt?
We have, yeah.
Sorry about that. It was a slight panic this end, but we're back online. Where did you get to?
We covered the cure for cancer and we're moving on to hydrogen, but that's fine.
Fair play.
We covered a fair bit of like the market conditions that we're all facing right now. Yeah. So I think, yeah, good start.
Were our views similar to yours, I assume, then, in terms of just the need, I suppose, to speed to market, differentiating yourselves, I suppose, in terms of what you have to offer to the candidates? And obviously, I suppose, once you have attracted those candidates, this moves quite nicely into interviewing process and I suppose the onboarding piece, which is another part of our topic piece here, is once you've attracted and you've got candidates that are applying to roles, is the importance, I suppose, then of setting some sort of process in place which helps to land them safely and before others.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say that that maintenance of engagement really starts at the interview process because once a candidate is interviewing, then they're going to be interviewing in other organizations as well. And sometimes it could be, sometimes the path of least resistance, in terms of the interview process, how quickly something can happen, how quickly it can turn around. So, trying to maintain that engagement level and make sure that candidates are attending interviews and things like that are enthused enough to be able to do so is really important. And Nick, I know, Nick Glynn, when you and I were having a chat about this is something that you put a huge amount of effort and time into as well. And obviously has bore fruit with the people that you've been able to bring on recently. Can you give us a bit of a background to kind of how you ran your interview processes?
Yeah, absolutely. We again, I did cover a little bit of it before when you guys decided to take a little bit of a holiday on the chat, but yeah, I mean, the one thing that we do is we take that kind of startup ethos a little bit to heart in a lot of other aspects. So one of the big ones is kind of like finding the market, finding out the communities where these people are. So I mean, I make sure that I stay active as a developer. I stay kind of like involved in kind of like the communities that we hire for. And just kind of, it's nice to be able to have that give and back. I'm not just going to kind of blast out, I'm recruiting for blah, I'm going to actually engage with these guys. And it could be the case that there's some synergies or some opportunity to work together on some other side projects potentially. So finding people is obviously one part of that. And that's one of the things we have to be very mindful of for us as a startup is we're competing alongside these guys who can come in and kind of offer crazy salaries. So one thing we've got to look at is how can we excite these people? How can we get them engaged and how do they feel like they're going to be part of something that's on an incredible trajectory, which is how we would pitch it. With regards to the process itself, as I mentioned, when you guys had vanished, is we need to move fast. We have to make sure we can't really guard against counteroffers. If someone ultimately is looking for a myriad of roles, then we want to actually stand out and be the company that they want to work for. At the end of the day, we're not going to just be able to go, well, you guys got an offer here, so we're going to cut an even bigger check. We ultimately want people who are actually motivated by the actual ambition of what we're trying to achieve for the business. So we typically move pretty fast. What do? We do reach out with me. We do a chat with my co-founder. And then potentially, if it's a technical challenge, we'll try and keep that quite short. Again, mindful of these candidates' time, how many other businesses do want to kind of like get them to do some sort of tech stack challenge. We do obviously encourage these people to share. I think I talked to you, Matt and Cam, before. We showed like a list of these challenges that guys can work through because ultimately we want them to be able to share these things. Like if you're going to do a challenge for Quicker Pay, then you may as well be able to actually share this and actually put it in your own portfolio rather than some of these other companies where they will just say, well, no, you did our check challenge. That's our IP. We're not going to let you share that. There's no experience or learning experience for you guys to actually bounce off of. So that's pretty much it, is we do the tech challenge, we do a bit of a vibe check, and then we're all about the hell yeah or the hell no, nothing in between.
I think thanks for that, Nick. I think just picking up on one of the points you mentioned there, and I think we talked about this before, a really important piece that we've found is you as a founder are having those conversations quite early on, if not the first round.
Yeah.
I think for candidates as well, there's automatically sort of buy-in straight away with you as an organization, with you as a person, and also the product, right? And I think that's quite key. And certainly I think for the sort of startup, scale-up fintechs, that's a huge advantage, I think, in this current marketplace, that you can, have that meeting in front of a founder or a CTO very early on, and get that buy-in, right?
Absolutely.
Nicholas, is this a similar process for you?
Yeah, I'd echo some of what Nick was saying. As fintechs, we don't maybe have the brand presence of other larger organizations, so it's not immediate, what we potentially might stand for or what part of the product stack looks like. So it is really important to engage with the candidate early. Certainly as a CTO, I mainly focus on engineering candidates, and we're not purely focused on people that have finance engineering as well, really more focused on some of the broader skill sets that they can bring holistically as engineering talent. We could get them to understand the product. We can get them to understand the business process. So it's really important in terms of when I meet them to really sell the business, really expand what we do, what the process is. Particularly with MPPA, fast payments rail, sometimes it's a little bit of a dark art, and you kind of ask the first question, do you have a pay ID? And it sort of usually exercises the response where they say no. It's like, okay, well, that's pretty critical to our business. Let's go through how that works. But that kind of engages them because they understand really what the business process is. And as an engineering talent, you really then expose the mechanisms of how we really bring that product to market. And I think the opportunity with fintech when you're engineering talent is you can really work at the coalface directly on the product a lot closer than you can in a larger organization when you really are just kind of one small cog in the greater machine. So now with that, comes the challenges and rewards. So we're not really shy on saying what the challenges are in terms of, being so close and being so responsible for the product. But I think it's really a great opportunity, particularly for that sort of mid-level engineering talent to really take on more accountability than they normally would in a larger organization to accelerate. Looking at Maslow's chart of accountability and that self-actualization is where people really get energized in terms of a role. So
I totally agree. I mean, that's exactly what we're finding when we're speaking to candidates as well. And that there's we use that as an obvious sell, if I'm honest with you, in terms of sort of attracting candidates to the startup, scale-up fintech world, is that you, as an engineer, as you say, are involved in that full life cycle, and you see that product out there, right? And I think that's that's a reward that a number of these engineers will see what they've built in production. And as you say, some of the larger organizations will really struggle with that sort of full life cycle, and the end product goal basically is you're passing on some of that delivery to other teams. Very relevant. Rachel, is that similar with you guys at Slip? I know
yeah. Like, I think, you know, if we talk about process, like I do have to echo what Nick said, and very much kind of getting the founders and the leadership involved early stage. I think, you know, a solid process is largely around communication, and you really need to let people know what steps are going to be involved. And, you know, we should assess people and we should technically test them at the same time, but hopefully to get their commitment throughout that process, so you're not kind of getting the drop-offs. And I think like the emotional aspect that comes when you have candidates falling out of your process as well, because that can be hard on the teams. So a big part of that is feedback and offering feedback throughout the process, and giving a really strong holistic view of the full business. So yes, founders and leadership, but one thing that really works well for us is doing a technical assessment, but doing it at peer level. So, you know, people will get an understanding of who they're going to be working with on a day-to-day basis, and realistically, what kind of problems they're going to be solving.
Yeah, I think, again, that's really important. Again, comparing that to some of the larger organizations who are also carrying out technical assessments, is that those assessments tend to be, I'm generalizing, sort of, you know, early part of the process before some of these candidates have actually met with anyone in person. I think you're absolutely right. There is an importance to obviously having these technical assessments, but if you can, I suppose, coordinate those appropriately, part of that process, and do it where you can face-to-face with individuals, is you're probably going to get more buy-in straight away, aren't you?
Yeah. And, you know, like, let's not make it too arduous. I think we've moved away from big homework assignments and things that take hours and hours. I think what is more insightful is something that's live and is there, and they'll get feedback in the session from other engineers at the same time.
Yeah, good point.
Rachel, I was interested, you know, a larger business like Slip, where you're interviewing for a number of different roles, and you know, you're hiring for a number of different kind of skill sets. We talk about the importance of getting, you know, the founders involved at the early stage, you know, to get that buy-in from candidates, and, you know, who better to sell the product than you know, people that have come up with it. How would a company like Slip of a certain size kind of balance the time, you know, because obviously there's going to be a number of different candidates, as there would, you know, as opposed to Nick, you know, he knows, you know, the very much the specific skill set that he's looking for, and potentially hire for one or two positions at a time. How would a company of the size of Slip kind of get that balance right between the time for candidates and then time for founders to get involved in the early stage as well?
Yeah. So Slip's 40 people now. So, you know, we're a reasonable kind of significant size, and might have anywhere between, you know, right now, maybe 8 roles that we're hiring for across the business. Like, you need the whole leadership team to be aligned on what those roles are and what their priorities are, and carve out time for them. And it's genuinely just expectations built into their roles as well. And, you know, if we've got our weekly leadership meeting, it's hilarious. It's everyone's favorite topic, and it's the one that they really want to get behind. But you really need to encourage that culture that, you know, it's not Nick's job or that person's job over there. It's something that everyone really needs to kind of own their discipline and just carve out time for it. You know, even like, for example, the engineers that do all of our technical assessments, I ask for 2 hours a week from each of them, and we mix it up between them, and, you know, they can carve that out however they carve that out, but just make sure that, you know, the burden isn't falling on 1 or 2 individuals to do it, that you can kind of take everyone along that journey.
Yeah, nice, good. And then, you know, once we're able to identify the candidates that, you know, are going to make a positive impact to the business, a lot of things that we talk to candidates on in the kind of the headaches of the onboarding process. You know, once an offer is made, and you know, how do we make it easier? How do we make that process, you know, less of a headache for candidates? I mean, I'd imagine in your role, you know, that's something that you take a huge amount of responsibility for as well. For organizations that perhaps don't have someone like yourself with a huge amount of experience and don't have a dedicated talent acquisition, what would be good for smaller businesses perhaps to take on board, and how do they make that process as simplistic as possible?
I think first off, just let them know, and like that's something that I'll even say, haven't really got there with Slip yet. It's in the backlog with a bunch of other things. So, onboarding and pre-onboarding, I try to not put too much pressure on people in that pre-onboarding stage, just because they're probably finishing up another role. I'm going to assume they're engaged, check in with them, but just give it a bit of space as well. Maybe share like a couple decks or invite them to a staff meet. But I think it's kind of more important in that week one that you nail that week one. And that should really be kind of a mix of larger business sessions where you kind of get a deeper dive into product vision roadmap, but also just time to do some work and actually start to kind of tinker around the edges of things. And that just might be, for tech talent, that might be uplift to kind of start before they start getting into the grunt of things. But, I think an added challenge to that is that, and I don't know if I've got the answer to this, I'm constantly kind of seeking other people's solutions, but how we do that when we're remote and how to onboard people when they might only really kind of be in the office 2 or 3 days. We've had a couple things that have worked for us, but I don't think we've kind of properly nailed it at the same point. So that's something that's on my mind at the moment as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially within the last year or so, when a lot of interview processes, things like that, have had to happen remotely. The onboarding side of things, there's been huge kind of shakeups in how business is doing. And I think you're exactly right. There's no one correct way of doing it. It's kind of feeling what works for you and what works for a business of a certain size. Nick Glynn, I know that you again, you've been able to onboard some people successfully recently. From deciding that they were the right candidate, what's been the process for you in terms of making sure that when they arrive, for their first day, that they're able to get up to speed and yeah, exactly, arrive perhaps remotely, perhaps in person, who knows, to make sure that they're kind of going to be contributing relatively quickly.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't think, similar to Rachel, I don't think we've quite figured it out yet. We are refining it. We do have a process now around like, what does our pre-boarding look like? The benefit I have is that I've worked at, like I said, I've built teams at Spaceship, worked at Campaign on a couple of other bigger tech companies who are later stage. So you can kind of learn a couple of lessons there and kind of what to do, what not to do, etc. So the one thing we kind of do, and it sounds so cliche, we just literally ticket it, Trello. So we use Trello for pretty much everything. It's kind of how we know what's going on in the business, a myriad of boards. But for us, it's all about making sure that we're setting these guys up for success, right? They're going to land in, they might be, if it's engineering, it would be kind of wrong role. If it's product, if it's this, if it's UX, etc. But the general pre-boarding would consist of making sure the paperwork's lined up, making sure, like, we use Slack. So making sure Slack's set up for these guys, getting them a new MacBook. That's kind of the lovely glossy thing. I feel like it's almost like, goes without saying now. I remember when I first started in the industry, and you rock up and there'd be this dusty old kind of piece. Blow the dust off and give to the new guy, and they go, "You're gonna like this." But yeah, so it's all about getting the MacBook, make them feel like they're getting something shiny, because they're going to be, this is their portal into the company. Getting all set up, getting the paperwork, going through the processes, and then basically as soon as they hit day one, I pretty much make sure that either myself or someone else senior in the team is available for them to actually run them through. Either, if it's me, it'll be kind of like the culture, the values and all that sort of stuff, hit the ground running, understand more about the business, the stuff we may have omitted or kind of cut short during the interview process. Or if it's the engineering, the guys just take them by the hands and make sure that they kind of pair with them for the most of that day, kind of run them through how the tech stack's structured, look at what the product looks like, look at where our assets, marketing, how we build the company, basically.
Yeah, I think that's quite an important piece as well. Is and one of the things that we've seen working is almost, once we've got an acceptance from a candidate, is that gardening leave, wherever it might be, is to almost put together a bit of homework for them. They almost feel engaged as well, that they're sort of reading up on the organisation, on the product, and almost feel part of it, and that sort of cliche piece, but actually hit the ground running on day one, is that they're sort of up to speed in terms of where you're at as an organisation. And the second point you made there, which again is worth reiterating, is involving them in that piece, you know, being very upfront and honest early on in terms of, you know, the accounts piece, where the direction of the organisation is going, where you are currently, you know, some of the sort of warts and all type discussions is obviously important, right? Because that's an honest and they feel that they're sort of engaged very early on in their starting career.
Yeah, it's so important. Like if you get it wrong, I mean, one of the big motivators for people leaving jobs is if that management or that connection hasn't happened. It's almost like with like a newborn. You know, if that pairing doesn't happen, then people are going to be disengaged. They're not going to understand what they do on a day-to-day basis impacts the business exactly, almost day-to-day, you know? So it's absolutely fundamental to get that onboarding kind of process right. And again, we are still learning. We are still obviously growing as a team and as a maturity in a business. But it's definitely something we want to make sure that guys have a great time.
Yeah, it's important. I think sometimes we forget about that, and organisations forget about it. It's almost like, right, we've got a start date, and a particular engineer is going to start on a certain date. But actually, as you say, quite rightly say, it starts before that, right? That pre-onboarding is important. My
favourite thing is the people that reach out and they'll just appear in Slack like a week before. And it's like, hey, Tom, you know, like that. It's like they start shooting out gifs and memes. You're like, these people are perfect. And it's those questions of kind of like, is there anything I should know beforehand? Is there anything I can read up on? Any material you can give me to look over? And it's like, yeah, these people are motivated. I've hired the right person. It's a good feeling.
Yeah, it's confidence for you guys as well, I suppose, as well, right? It's a two-way thing.
Yeah. I think it's really important as well. Is you know once you've decided that person is someone that you want as part of the team, and you know the offer is made and hopefully accepted. You know, for the most part, those people are going to have a notice period somewhere else. You know, a month, perhaps a little bit sooner. And that period, you know, moving jobs, it's an emotive subject. You know, the doubts can creep in sometimes. You know, am I going from somewhere that is established? You know, am I taking a leap of faith to join a startup, you know, a fintech organization? So that level of communication, I think, really needs to be there. It can't just be, right, okay, look, here's the offer, fantastic, let's agree a start date, 4 weeks later you turn up, you know, because lots of things can happen within that period. And just making sure that the engagement levels are there, you know, checking in on them, how things gone with the resignation, you know, all that kind of stuff. These are the things that probably you're going to be contributing to. You know, it might be good to read up on X, Y, Z. You know, we find is things that are all going to be beneficial to ensure that they start, and then when they do start, that they're going to be getting up to speed pretty quickly.
Nicholas, same for you. In terms
I think the thing with onboarding, so we pair up and with the agile sort of ways of working, because we have a daily stand up, you know, they kind of get right exposed to the business problems and our interactions with product straight away, and that continues. But we definitely have a sort of buddy system in terms of buddying up. We've had a recent onboarding and really in terms of that person being able to push, code by the end of the first week was really a great outcome. So he understands our tooling, our tool chain, and how the product kind of works in terms of their first commit. So that was good. Continuing to really explain the business. So that's really for me in terms of checking in. So our separate to the engineering team or the squad lead to then explain, you know, what's the bigger part of the business and how that's working. Part of our, I suppose, online footprint is we have a developer sandbox, which is actually part of our kind of onboarding for our clients. But from an engineering point of view, it's a fantastic opportunity to always tell candidates to sign up. It's a self-service sign up, and they can really start to hit the APIs directly or the sandbox and really understand what the actual product is that we present into market, which is great. I think from an engagement point of view, you know, our CEO is really active on LinkedIn and other kind of podcasts and pieces. And so that constant messaging is really helpful as well, because it drops in more business context around what the engagement is. And you kind of have that halo effect where you see where he's getting engaged or where our marketing presenting ourselves. And so that gives much more, I suppose, acceleration to what I can potentially explain directly. So.
Yeah, and again, coming back to that point of getting the CEO involved in part of that, is you get immediate buy-in, don't you, around the product, the organisation, you know, the family, as it were. All very good points. Okay.
So I think one of the things that we're keen to explore as well, and I think that, you know, it really depends on where the organisation is up to in terms of, you know, establishing a team. You know, on the startup side of things, you know, there are people that are very keen to take the leap of faith and are in a position to be able to do so. And what we find that sometimes when people are looking at putting together their team or trying to expand their team, they can sometimes be a bit top heavy. You know, those people that are very much on the startup train, are keen to join, and then we have people at the more junior level as well. Nick, I guess for you, you know, with your engineering team now being a little bit more established, what are the difficulties, or how do you work through getting a team that is fairly balanced in terms of senior, mid-level, junior? How do you work that? Nicholas, sorry.
Which Nick?
Yeah, sorry, Nicholas.
Remember the rules. So for our team, we do have a mixture. We've literally just started the steps to bring on specialists. And that's been an interesting one. Like, it's very kind of, you kind of almost want to hire those T-shaped engineers or T-shaped team members where they got a good breadth, but then they've got obviously their deep specialty. So we've kind of, we're going for more of a lowercase T, I guess, at the moment, purely because we're at the time where, yes, it's great to have a specialist who can be involved in every aspect, but there's simply too many things to do, too much context. I mean, I struggle sometimes to obviously keep every single plate spinning in the business. But I don't want to push that onto the team. I don't expect all of my generalist guys to obviously know every aspect of the team. So we now have junior front end. We have kind of like someone helping on pure product and the UX experience, redundant. But looking at those individual aspects and ownership is actually quite important. It's one of the ways that I've actually found it's a good way to get people to own something, because if you own something, you feel a part of it, which is really important. Similar to Nicholas, damn it, messed my own rules up. Similar to what Nicholas was saying, though, is it's really important that these guys can push code or push and see their designs kind of hit production really, really quickly. Like, we had iterations on our flow very, very rapidly being pushed out. We have kind of our front end designer hit the ground running, working with a more senior who is more generalist. They're working together to build up the specialism of this one guy, which means that he can focus on just one aspect. It means he can focus entirely on building out new layout components and getting those out. Like, we did a nice big announcement recently of the way that we were revising the way that our payout system works. We're all very, very proud of it. But the annoying thing is obviously it all matters about what it looks like on the front end. That guy literally feels like he's totally a part of it because he's the one who's shipping those components. His day-to-day is to make sure that the product looks good and making sure that those iterations are tight. So it's hard as a generalist myself. You almost have to kind of like give away the kind of the glory to an extent. And I said this to one of our senior guys. I was like, you're not going to be able to be on every single aspect of the business at this point. You can guide it, you can set a direction, but it's very much the case that there's going to be the specialists who kind of come in and they go, yeah, I can smash this out in an hour, versus you doing it as a generalist and it takes you 4 hours, even though you've got a wealth of experience. So it's an interesting balancing act. We just try and make sure that we over communicate at all times. That's pretty much the only way you can do it. I would give a slight shout out to a tool we use, which is called Pop. I may have mentioned it before. It is fantastic, and it literally, Slack's great, video calls are great, Zoom, we're done to death with Zoom. But with Pop, you literally just jump straight onto that person's screen and you can start drawing on it, illustrating, working with your actual developers as if you're in the same room, which, given we're all working remote and distributed teams now, that's a really, really useful tool.
Awesome.
Have a look at that.
Yeah, and yeah, same question to Nicholas, please.
Sorry, I missed some of that context. Just in tooling, or
I was basically talking, and I think, you know, with someone of a team the size of yours, how do you get that balance right between junior, kind of mid-level, and senior, right, with people being more happy to jump into startups than others? How do you get that balance right?
Yeah, so I think as Nick said, we're kind of you know, it's a bit of a unicorn myth to try and hire in that kind of 10x kind of full stack engineer. So there is a sort of a bit of a demarcation between kind of front end skills, guys who know how to spell React and Angular, and the back end guys who just kind of want to do the heavy lifting side of it. I think there's a few memes running around what what an IT team looks like in terms of the unicorn at the front and the Clydesdale at the back type thing. So, but we kind of split that up there. But as you said, in terms of that T-shaped engineer, we want to have people who are flexible, and certainly part of it is making sure they understand the entire process. And it comes into our support model as well. We're a small team. We don't have like a lights on operations team that can look at things after dark. So it's definitely DevOps. We drink our own champagne, to use the euphemism. So it's in your own interest to make sure you have a good code base and not getting woken up at 2 a.m. But it is hard on the team sometimes. So you don't want to rely on the same people. But sometimes you have certain skills where that is the case. So it is a challenge to balance that sometimes. But certainly, mainly front end, back end with a bit of mix to get people flexible. We have some key integration skills as well, but it's usually more at the back end that focuses on. And I think, all fintechs are probably built on the shoulders of the hyperscalers in the cloud. And so we find that a lot of our infrastructure is delivered through that way. So there's knowledge that's needed, and there's probably growth that can happen in understanding from a full systems design what that means. I do find that in the market sometimes with some developers, they're just really in that software engineering bubble where they really need to know the consequences in terms of full system design. But we definitely have the benefit that from a high level of resilience and scaled engineering, we can basically run most things on the cloud. It's fantastic.
Just to add, I mean, from a basic point of view, what we're finding at the moment is, from a startup world, the demand has been certainly in volume piece of more junior to mid-level engineers. And as you then step into sort of scale-up mode, in that startup mode, the CTO tends to be, or CIO tends to be sort of quite hands-on and sleeves rolled up. What we're seeing is, that sort of trigger into the scale-up piece is that actually the need and then therefore the demand for the traditional team leaders, if you like, mentors to come in to free up the CTO a little bit in terms of sort of still laying down that overall strategy from a delivery perspective, but actually then the need for that extra layer for a team lead, if you like, or a head of technology to sort of come on board and to really start to mentor and take full responsibility and have autonomy for that delivery piece. So that tends to be a nice trigger for us when we sort of crudely see startup going into scale-up mode is the requirements coming through for more of a sort of head of tech or team lead type roles, that sort of mid to senior level technologist. Rach, just going back up to you, is that similar with you guys? I mean, in terms of sort of that scale-up piece, I mean, probably a bit of a loaded question. We sort of know some of the hires that you're looking for at the moment, but would that be the case, do you think, for you?
Yeah, we're half engineers, effectively out of 40. So we've definitely got a mix of senior, junior, lead. And, I guess to answer your question, the initial question around how you get it right, like the ones that you really want to nail and you want to be 100% hell yeah is leadership. Everyone needs to be fully confident in those because they'll build out that next generation and they'll be able to, spot and grow, and people are going to have to context shift. So they'll be able to kind of take the juniors and the mids along with them. But you do need a couple anchors. You do need your leadership to be really solid, and you need those team lead roles to be, you need to back those ones equally. But those are the ones that are going to be managing people in a day-to-day, having the one-to-ones. So I think those are the ones that are most important for us. And part of the benefit of really kind of working in a startup scale-up is that you can be flexible, and you can, you don't need to be so defined on, we need X, we need them to look this kind of perfect shape. You can hire on aptitude, and it's the leads that are going to be able to spot that and nurture that along their employee experience as well.
Great. And also for the attraction of mid-level engineers is, again, we've touched on this, the importance of having, meeting the CEO, the founders, etc., is obviously important, but on a day-to-day basis, as you say, to have a mentor that you can get on well with, you can learn from, is vitally important, I think, at the moment.
I think another aspect, which is a tipping point, is that if you're scaling up or you've grown that team, do you actually have someone who's sort of growing to be that natural leader of that particular squad, or do you have to bring in someone externally? And it is a very tough decision to sort of say, okay, we need to bring someone in externally to do that. And obviously, you know, depending on how fast you are, or how fast you're growing, sometimes that's just a decision you do have to make. But it would obviously be better to grow that talent internally in terms of moving into a more leadership position. Because all the organizations are flat, we're not huge organizations, so at least giving some additional accountability is a level of kind of, you know, upping the kind of, I suppose, what their responsibilities are, and how you can differentiate a little bit in terms of your team, which kind of then does come back to REM a little bit, because you're obviously asking someone to do more, and they're seeing some growth in their career as well, rather than just being in that team and all of a sudden you're putting, you know, someone on top of it. So.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I suppose then, therefore, you know, you perhaps start that identification early. You know, when you are looking to try and hire mid-level engineers, perhaps that is part of that process, is that you're looking for the next leader, the next team leader, and potentially even sort of nurture them through for that sort of role. That's a good point. Yeah, we're talking about hiring people in above people. Actually, that's probably a much better, a much safer way of doing things, is actually to identify that talent early and be able to nurture that through.
It's interesting as a leader. I mean, you know, you want to push and mentor people through, but it's almost, you know, the people who, you know, always won't walk past and just pick something up, right? They'll take on that accountability. They're all stepping up. So that it's almost like a natural candidacy that you see rising to the top. And sometimes it's, you know, as much as you push people, you know, they're never really going to step up if you're asking them to. So they're happy what they're doing in their lane, so that's fine. But you do really hope that you've got some talent you can obviously rise up. So.
Nick, Glenn, I'm sure you've got these challenges to face coming up probably fairly soon. Is that something that you've been mindful of when you've been hiring your people, as you know, in terms of what they could contribute to in the future as well? Are they able to take that step up?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we talked about internally, me and my co-founder. It's the goal that we wanted to achieve this year to some extent is to pretty much fire ourselves from our previous roles, because as I mentioned, there's too many things to do as an early stage founder. So hiring senior guys, one of us was going to jump in, so I do apologize. But the one thing that is important for us as an early stage team is identifying those kind of like those keystone employees. So who can I put, what are the bedrocks I can put in that ensure that no matter what other I can change a certain amount of dynamics in the team, those keystones are going to help preserve that culture in that direction, that excellence level that we kind of need. So that's been an interesting one. We have made some hires recently in that space, and that's good. Stepping up's an interesting one. I don't know, it's still my baby, so I'm very kind of like precious over it at the moment. So I'm like, it's all right if you don't want to step up, it's still mine. So
at some point you're gonna have to.
Shut up. I get it, but it's one of those things. Like ultimately, it will come down to what we need to do as a business. Do I need to step more into that product role? Do I need to do more of the strategic role? Do I need to do more of the marketing role? By basically stepping into those things, identifying it, and then I can basically fire and hire for that role effectively. It's all about figuring out what is that succession chain. It might be the case that you bring on someone and you're like, this person's absolutely amazing technically, but then you have that kind of sidebar and they go, well, actually, I'm really happy just doing tech. My entire craft is what I love doing. I don't want to manage people. I'm happy to lead, but I'm all about just pure tech. And that can be a bit of a slap in the face. I've had organizations where that has been the case, and I'm like, damn it, you would have been awesome. But it all comes down to what is the individual motivator. Similar to what Nicholas was saying, if someone is purely driven by like kind of like the love of the tech, you're never going to make them happy as a manager.
Yeah. And again, on that point, just whilst I'm thinking about it, is actually certainly within the sort of fintech world, is I think there is an opportunity, possibly less so in some of the larger FS organizations, for engineers to remain as engineers, right, and do what they love and what they started out to do, rather than feel that they've got to further their career to step into a leadership role. There's that sort of more flat structure where actually an engineer can do what they want to do and do what they set out to do and still be crudely paid for doing a good job, rather than the pressure of stepping into some sort of management or leadership role. And often we have this from candidates that have gone down that route to then turn around 18 months later and say, actually, please can I have a more hands-on role? I want to get back into the tech.
I think it happens all too often. You know, lots of organizations, bigger organizations, will associate management with seniority, and you know, you're given one path basically to continue up the ladder. And at those bigger organizations, it doesn't work. You know, you're putting a square peg in a round hole. You're taking an amazing engineer away from doing what he or she loves to do something that perhaps they're not great at. And I think that, you know, having that flat structure, allowing that person to be an individual contributor, but perhaps taking on more responsibility from a product ownership point of view or a project management point of view, you know, you'd be able to do that at a smaller organization as opposed to some of the larger ones. Just kind of with that in mind, and I guess that, you know, you always want to promote from within and give existing team members that option to be able to take on additional responsibility at a point where maybe, you know, those avenues have been exhausted and you would need to hire externally. Is there mileage in perhaps kind of augmenting the way those people are remunerated? You know, if you get, you know, the people in at the early stages, generally they would have a relatively smaller base, and it would be the upside of it would be the equity, you know, and when the company hopefully does well. Is there more of a case of when you're trying to get that kind of management level in, and you know, people that probably aren't in as financially a secure position, you know, maybe they have families and things like that, where they wouldn't necessarily associate moving to a startup. Is there an opportunity to have a slightly different kind of pay scale for someone at that kind of level? Rachel, is that something that Slip have thought about?
It is, and it's something that we do as well. I think, you know, if we talk about diversity, we can't also not talk about gender diversity. And one thing that I've really found is, you know, the startup world is a little bit less appealing sometimes to females who, I think, you know, I'm going to make some generalizations, but tend to like the comforts of larger companies. So that's one thing that we've struggled with. And I think one thing we're experimenting with is giving people the option. You know, I think, again, part of the benefit of working for a smaller company is that we can be a little bit more flexible and offer different types of scenarios. Is it, you know, higher base, lower options? How do we talk about bonuses or salary uplift? Do we give people, you know, the option of either? And that's one thing that we've been able to do so far. We won't be able to do it forever, but for those first kind of 50, 60 early stage employees, it's something that I think most companies should be talking about for sure.
Right. Yeah. Nicholas, you guys are obviously at a similar kind of size to Slip. I mean, is that something that you guys are thinking about as well in terms of, you know, how we remunerate these people and how we make joining a startup scale up attractive to lots of different types?
Yeah, look, I think we definitely meet the market in terms of what expectations are, and I think not every flashy startup is all about the options and you know, what we can provide from a rem piece. So it's pretty sensible. We scan the market, we understand what people are looking for, and then, you know, hopefully we can wrap around a fuller package for that side of it. And I think to Rachel's point around diversity and candidacy, we're really, you know, try and be as open as possible, and it's the perennial pipeline problem. Certainly, as Nick said, I try and get around to different meetups and sort of espouse the support around the community as well, and get that kind of exposure out and support, so it becomes a two-way street. And interestingly, you had some recent candidates who decided to make another choice, but I don't know if I'd overpitched and they thought it was going to be too much of a rocket ship with their ears pinned back. But I definitely said if it didn't work out, you know, we had more than one open role, so please come back, and you know, we're really happy to take them on. So or the door's always open.
Good. Nick, Glyn,
Cameron,
yeah. On the same note, I mean, in terms of, you're obviously going to be looking for, you know, to hand over the baby at some point. You know, is that something that you've thought about as well in terms of sort of how that might be structured? It might be too early to have had those chats, but
yeah, one thing we've, if you look to the US is a great example of what empowering employees and kind of like rewarding them for that early stage kind of gamble can do to an ecosystem. I think it's one thing that Sydney's getting better at. My view is that I lean heavily on giving away more in regards to ESOP and that obviously options in equity and stuff like that, purely because I want the guys that we work with, I want them to really feel like they're sharing our success. There's no point, I've worked at companies where before they won't share what the valuation of the company is, where we're doing, we love to talk about this sort of stuff because it's important to know that the impact of what these guys are working on has a direct kind of like either a revenue or a valuation driver. So for us, me and my business partner, we literally talk through kind of like where we're going, what we're doing, our next kind of like when we're going to be raising again. We try and share as much within reason as possible because it directly impacts what these guys would see. And it makes those conversations a lot easier because if you say to an employee, they go, well, I'm getting underpaid, I'm only getting this, I should be getting this. And you can say, well, actually, based on the fact that we gave you a huge chunk of options, like you've actually made like 4 times your base this year in valuation. It's hard, obviously, if you can't obviously pull that off as a business, and obviously there may be down rounds in the future, who knows? But I think there's a lot to be said about being able to say kind of like, you guys are on the journey with us. Like there's the whole point of this. I mean, me and my business partner become some of the lowest paid employees in our business, but because we have that equity, we have that position, we're taking that direction, we're taking that gamble. The one thing I would love to solve for is obviously, I think maybe it's a male-female divide with regards to risk appetite. I'd love to solve that, but we do have a number of early stage female employees, which is lovely. But we can always do better. We can always improve these things. So it's trying to understand how we can work with different drivers for different people and making sure that kind of like they feel motivated. I think one thing that has actually helped is as flexibility increases, because you're not just doing a 9 till 5, there is obviously that inherent ability to work remotely and you are kind of a little bit able to be a little more flexible. I think that's a good thing for a lot of women, a lot of other people who potentially may not have that flexibility from a normal 9 till 5. So hopefully we'll see, maybe it could be the COVID's the great equalizer. We just don't know yet, but that would be a good thing. The one thing I would finally add though is I'd recommend a lot of the kind of like the fintech leaders to read the book by Dan Pink on Drive. It's basically what motivates modern people. And it's all about that autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Kind of like, what is it that drives people? It's believing in a vision. It's being able to actually do and deliver on that, and actually doing it obviously well in your craft. So it's interesting to flip it on its head around kind of like, what does motivate a modern team? How do you keep them excited? Because it's not all about the remuneration. And as an early stage founder, I can obviously attest to that.
What a beautiful wrap up, Nick. It's almost like you rehearsed that. Nicholas, have you got anything to add? Ryan's giving us a sort of heads up that we're sort of coming towards the end, but is there anything that you wanted to add from that as a summary?
Oh, look, I think, it's always going to be challenging in terms of attracting and retaining talent. As leaders, it's, as Rachel said, it's an always on job. So it's not just set and forget. Stay engaged in the market. I keep really close to your team and really keep a sense of them and be a good leader for them, I think is the key call out.
Totally agree. Rach, anything you want to summarize or wrap up at all?
No, thank you. I think one thing that we could all think about is how we support each other. I think it is so competitive. We're all kind of looking for the same stuff. Most of us are complementary businesses. I don't have the answer, but I'd love us to kind of work together as a community. Like, it's great to see a lot of the collaboration that's happening with Intersect, but how does that kind of translate to talent and to, creating opportunities for people outside of what's in your direct line of vision for your role, your company? I don't know. Maybe that can be next year's topic.
Would have solved it by then.
Possibly, yeah. I certainly agree. And that's a lovely wrap in terms of Intersect as well. And this is why we wanted to be part of it, is to feel that we were sort of, set to point sometimes, but actually just part of this community. And it's important for us as, with that external view, of course, and to really understand what motivates you guys, what the product's all about, and obviously from a talent point of view, what we can do better to help you attract the right talent and probably more importantly, retain it as well. Anything to add at all? I know we're coming towards the end, but lastly, just thank you guys, for agreeing to be part of our first webinar. Hopefully it won't be our last, but thank you very much for joining. Rayan, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity as well to do this. And hopefully we see everyone down in Melbourne this week, yeah, for Intersect. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Look forward to seeing everyone down there.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
See you.
Thanks ever so much. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.